There's something so profoundly beautiful and yet so unsettling about the way God moves in our lives when it comes to relationships. We think we know who should stay, who should go, who deserves our time, our love, our trust. We make our lists. We set our expectations. We hold on tightly to the people we believe belong in our story. But God, He sees what we cannot. He knows the hearts of men in ways we never will. And if we let Him, if we truly surrender our connections to His hands, He will show us with divine clarity who truly belongs in our lives. You see, we operate in the natural. We judge by what we see, by what we feel in the moment. We are drawn to charisma, to charm, to the words that sound like honey but may carry no substance. We cling to people because of history, because of comfort, because we fear loneliness more than we fear misalignment. But God, He operates in the realm of the eternal. He looks past the surface, past the smooth words and the grand gestures, straight into the heart. And He knows, He always knows who is meant to walk with us, who is meant to push us toward our purpose, and who is only there to distract us, drain us, or worse, derail us from His will. I've watched so many people, good, sincere people, cling to relationships that God was trying to loosen from their grip. They fought to keep doors open that He was closing. They begged for restoration where He was calling for release. And then in His mercy, He allowed the truth to surface. The friend who was never really a friend, the partner who was never truly committed, the mentor who was leading them astray. God didn't expose these things to hurt them. No, He exposed them to free them. Because He loves us too much to let us settle for counterfeit connections when He has ordained divine ones. There's a scripture that says, "The Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Samuel 16:7. That's the key, isn't it? We judge by what's visible, but God judges by what's real. And sometimes the people we are convinced are supposed to be in our lives, the ones we've fought for, pleaded for, even prayed for, are not the ones He has written into our story. And when we try to force it, when we try to override His wisdom with our emotions, we end up with unnecessary heartache. But here's the glorious truth. When we release our relationships into His hands, when we say, "God, you know better than I do, show me who stays and who goes," He begins to align our lives with precision. He brings people who sharpen us, who pray for us, who challenge us to grow. And He removes those who were only there to occupy space, to drain our energy, or to keep us from stepping into the fullness of our calling. So if you're in a season where relationships are shifting, where some are fading and others are appearing, don't panic, don't resist, trust Him. Because God isn't just working on your life, He's working through the people He places in it. And when He shows you who truly belongs, you won't have to force it, you won't have to beg for loyalty, it will simply be. Because what God ordains, He sustains. Let Him align your connections. His way is perfect. Life, my dear friend, is a tapestry of seasons, each one necessary, each one purposeful, each one ordained by the hand of God. And just as the earth shifts from spring to summer, from autumn to winter, so too do the relationships in our lives move through seasons of change. Some people are only meant to walk with us for a little while. Not because they failed us, not because we failed them, but because their role in our story was never meant to be permanent. And if we can understand this, if we can release our grip on what was and trust God for what will be, we will save ourselves so much unnecessary heartache. See, we get so attached to the idea of forever. We want every friendship to last a lifetime, every love to endure, every mentor to remain close. But God, in His infinite wisdom, knows that some people are only meant to pass through our lives for a reason. Maybe they were there to teach us a lesson we couldn't learn any other way. Maybe they were there to pull us out of a pit, to speak a word in due season, to help us survive a storm. And once that purpose is fulfilled, the relationship changes. It doesn't mean it wasn't real. It doesn't mean it didn't matter. It simply means that season has come to an end. I've watched so many people cling to relationships that God was clearly moving out of their lives. They held on out of fear, fear of loneliness, fear of change, fear of the unknown. But what they didn't realize was that by refusing to let go, they were blocking the new thing God wanted to do. You cannot embrace what God is bringing if your hands are still full of what He has asked you to release. And sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply opening your hands and saying, Lord, if this season is over, I trust you with what comes next. Then there are those who are with us for a season, not just a moment, not forever, but for a significant stretch of our journey. These are the ones who walk beside us through a particular chapter, through college, through a career shift, through the early years of marriage or ministry. And while their presence is powerful, even life-changing, we must recognize that not all relationships are designed to cross every finish line with us. Some people are gifts for a time, not for eternity. And when their season ends, we honor them by thanking God for what they brought into our lives, not by demanding they stay beyond their appointed time. But oh my friend, then there are the rare few who are with us for a lifetime. These are the ones who survive the shifts, the tests, the storms. These are the ones who don't walk away when things get hard, who don't disappear when God begins to elevate you. These are the ones who pray when you can't pray for yourself, who speak truth even when it's difficult, who love you enough to tell you when you're wrong. These are the ones God has marked to stay. And when He shows you who they are, when He makes it clear that they are not just for a season, but for the long haul, you hold them close, you cherish them, you fight for them, because these are the ones who reflect His faithfulness in your life. So if you're in a place where relationships are changing, where some are fading, some are growing distant, and some are being tested, don't despair, don't assume the worst. Instead, ask God for discernment. Lord, show me who is for this season and who is for a lifetime. And when He reveals it to you, trust Him enough to embrace the change, because every person He removes and every person He brings is part of a divine setup, leading you straight into His perfect will. Let God order your relationships. He knows the seasons better than you do. There comes a moment in every life, if you haven't faced it yet, you will, when the ground beneath you shakes. A storm rises, a trial hits, and suddenly the people you thought would stand beside you forever are nowhere to be found. The voices that once cheered you on grow silent. The hands that once held you up seem to slip away. And in that moment, you realize something profound. Not everyone who smiles at you in the light will stand with you in the dark. But child of God, listen closely. This is not a tragedy. This is divine revelation. This is God, in His mercy, pulling back the curtain to show you what has always been true. You see, testing does not create character, it reveals it. And the same is true of relationships. When the pressure comes, when the fire burns hot, what is real cannot hide. The people who are only there for the good times, for the celebrations, for the moments when your life makes them look good, they will scatter when the winds change. But those who are truly yours, those who have been planted by the hand of God, they will dig in their heels and stand. They won't be moved by your circumstances because they are anchored in something deeper than convenience. They are tied to you by something stronger than fair weather friendship. They are tied to you by divine purpose. I've seen it time and again. Someone will be walking in favor, surrounded by voices singing their praises, and then suddenly the test comes. Maybe it's a financial struggle. Maybe it's a health battle. Maybe it's a season of spiritual warfare where the enemy seems to have the upper hand. And in that moment, the crowd thins. The ones who are only there for the blessings, for the overflow, for the honor of association, they disappear. But the faithful few, they step closer. They pray harder. They speak life when death seems imminent. And in that crucible, God shows you who is truly yours. Don't you dare resent the test. Don't you dare question why God would allow people to walk away. He isn't punishing you. He's purifying your circle. He's removing the ones who would hinder you, distract you, or drain you dry on the journey ahead. He's making room for the ones who will not just enjoy the harvest with you, but will get in the dirt and sow with you when the ground is hard. Think of David, anointed to be king, yet hunted like an animal. And who stayed with him in the cave of Adullam? Not the fair weather friends, not the ones who only wanted to be near the throne. It was the desperate, the hungry, the ones who had nothing to gain, but everything to give. And in their loyalty, God was shaping an army that would change history. The test didn't break David. It showed him who was really on his side. And what about Jesus? When the crowds were fed, when the miracles flowed, thousands followed him. But when the shadow of the cross loomed, when the road grew narrow and dangerous, where were they? gone. Only a handful remained, the ones who loved him more than they loved their own lives. And even then, one betrayed him, another denied him. But God allowed it. Why? Because he was separating the superficial from the sincere. He was showing us that true connection isn't proven in the feast, but in the famine. So if you're in a season of testing, if you're looking around and wondering where everyone went, lift up your head. This isn't abandonment. This is alignment. God is sifting your relationship so that what remains is pure, strong, and unshakable. The ones who walk away were never meant to stay. But the ones who remain, they are gifts from God himself, treasures forged in fire, proven in battle, and marked to walk with you into the fullness of your destiny. Let the test do its work. It's revealing who was sent by God all along. There is a language God speaks that transcends human reasoning, a quiet, unshakable knowing that resonates deep in the spirit. It's not the clamor of external opinions or the pressure of earthly expectations. No, it's something far more profound, far more sure. It's the peace of God, that sacred stillness that settles over your soul like a gentle whisper, confirming what belongs and what does not. My friend, if you learn to discern this peace, you will never again question who is meant to walk beside you in this life. You see, the world will give you 1,000 reasons to hold on to relationships that God has finished with. They'll tell you about history, about obligation, about how much you've invested. But God, oh, he speaks in peace. Have you ever noticed how some connections, no matter how long they've been part of your life, leave you unsettled? You can't quite explain it, but something within you stirs with unease when you're with them. The conversations feel heavy, the atmosphere feels strained, and long after you've parted ways, you're left with a lingering unrest. That isn't coincidence. That isn't you being overly sensitive. That is the Spirit of God, whispering caution, revealing a misalignment that your natural mind hasn't yet recognized. Then there are those rare, precious relationships where peace flows like a river. You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to brace for hidden agendas. When you're with them, your spirit feels at home. There's a harmony, a mutual edification, a sense that God himself knit your paths together. Even in disagreement, there's no venom, no manipulation, just a shared commitment to what is true and right. That is the peace of God confirming a divine connection. The scripture says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." Colossians 3:15. The word rule there means to act as an umpire, to make the final call. Not emotions, not nostalgia, not fear of loneliness. Peace, God's peace. It will always guide you toward what he has ordained and away from what he hasn't. But here's the challenge. We often override that peace because we don't want to accept what it's telling us. We'll ignore the unease because we're afraid of being alone. We'll dismiss the red flags because we're desperate to believe the best. We'll silence the quiet voice of the Spirit because it doesn't align with our plans. And in doing so, we invite unnecessary chaos into our lives. I've watched people cling to toxic relationships, ignoring the unrest in their spirit, only to end up wounded and disillusioned. I've seen others walk away from godly connections because they mistook the enemy's noise for God's voice. But those who learn to let peace lead them, they are the ones who walk in divine alignment. They don't have to force relationships to work because they trust God to bring the right people at the right time. They don't agonize over who stays and who goes because they know the shepherd of their soul will never leave them without true companionship. So how do you know if someone belongs in your life? Close your eyes, quiet your mind, tune out the voices of the world and listen, really listen to what the Spirit is saying. Does this relationship bring you closer to God or does it pull you away? Does it inspire you to grow, or does it tempt you to compromise? Does it leave you feeling replenished or drained? Peace isn't just the absence of conflict. It's the presence of divine affirmation. And when God gives you peace about a person, no force in hell can break what he has joined. Let peace be your compass. It will always lead you to the people God has chosen for you. There is a sacred surrender that happens when we release people back to God. When we open our hands and say, even if I don't understand, I trust you. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, and yet it's one of the most freeing, because holding on to what God has removed will only leave you weary. Clinging to a closed chapter will only drain your joy. wrestling to keep someone in your life when God has clearly shifted their season, will only poison your heart with bitterness. And child of God, you were never meant to carry that weight. You see, we confuse love with possession. We think that if we truly care for someone, we must fight for them at all costs, even when God is saying, let them go. But real love isn't selfish. Real love doesn't demand its own way. Real love releases with blessing even when it hurts. Think about it. If someone no longer wants to walk with you, if their heart has grown distant, if their path is clearly diverging from yours, what good does it do to beg them to stay? You can't force loyalty, you can't manipulate divine connection, and you certainly can't guilt someone into being who you need them to be. The healthiest thing you can do for them and for you is to release them without bitterness and trust that God knows what He's doing. I've watched so many people destroy their own peace because they refused to accept that a relationship had ended. They chased, they pleaded, they replayed old memories like a broken record, wondering, what if I had done things differently? But here's the truth. If it was God's will for them to stay, no force on earth could have driven them away. And if God allowed them to leave, it's because He's protecting you from what you can't yet see. Every person who walks out of your life without a fight was never truly yours to begin with. The ones God has ordained to stay won't need convincing. They'll choose to stay again and again because their commitment isn't based on convenience, but on divine purpose. Now, I'm not saying it won't hurt. Loss always carries a sting. Even Jesus wept when relationships fractured. But there's a difference between grieving and gripping, between mourning what was and refusing to accept what is. One is healthy, the other is bondage. And if you're not careful, bitterness will creep in like a slow poison. You'll start resenting the person who left. You'll start doubting God's goodness. You'll build walls around your heart to keep from being hurt again. But walls don't just keep pain out, they keep love out too. Is that really how you want to live? God is a masterful gardener. He prunes what is dead so that what is living can thrive. And sometimes that means cutting away relationships that once bore fruit but no longer do. It's not cruel, it's necessary. Because if He didn't remove what was draining you, you'd never have room for what will fulfill you. The friend who walked away, the door had to close so the right one could open. The love that ended, it was making space for something deeper. The mentor who distanced themselves, their season in your life was complete. You may not see it now, but God isn't just working for you. He's working ahead of you. So how do you let go without bitterness? You choose forgiveness, not because what happened was okay, but because you refuse to let it define you. You bless where it hurts, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that bitterness only chains you, not them. And most of all, you trust God's heart. Even when His hand doesn't make sense, He sees the bigger picture. He knows what you need far better than you do. And if you release what He's removing, you'll step into a new level of freedom you didn't even know was possible. Letting go isn't losing, it's making room for what God has next. There is a holy tension in the waiting, a sacred space between what was and what will be, where God does His deepest work in us. We live in a world that rushes, that forces, that settles for quick connections and shallow commitments. But God, He operates on a different timetable. He isn't moved by our desperation or our loneliness. He isn't pressured by our ticking clocks or our fearful what-ifs. He knows exactly who He has prepared for you, and He knows precisely when to bring them across your path. The question is, can you trust Him enough to wait? You see, waiting isn't passive. It's not sitting in a corner mourning what you don't have. True waiting is active surrender. It's preparing your heart, refining your character, and aligning your spirit so that when God's best arrives, you're ready to recognize it and worthy to receive it. So many people miss divine connections because they were too busy clinging to counterfeits. They grew impatient and settled for less than God's best, only to realize too late that what they forced into place was never meant to be. But you don't have to make that mistake. If you'll let God lead, He won't just bring you anyone. He'll bring you the right one. I've seen it happen time and again. Someone will pray for a godly friend, a faithful partner, a mentor who speaks life. And then, when God doesn't answer on their schedule, they take matters into their own hands. They lower their standards. They ignore the red flags. They convince themselves that something is better than nothing. But God never called us to settle. He called us to trust. And the truth is, what you compromise to keep, you will eventually lose anyway. The relationships built on human striving rather than divine timing will always crumble under pressure. But what God builds, what He ordains, no force in hell can tear it apart. Think about Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a son, but when the waiting grew long, Sarah took matters into her own hands. She gave Hagar to Abraham, and for a moment it seemed like the problem was solved. But that wasn't God's plan. That wasn't His best. And the fallout from that decision brought strife that lasted for generations. Now imagine if Sarah had waited just a little longer. Imagine if she had held on to the promise. Instead of grasping for the quickest solution, she would have spared herself so much heartache. And that's what God is whispering to you today. Wait for my best. It's coming. And when it arrives, you'll understand why nothing else would do. The enemy will try to convince you that waiting means you've been forgotten. He'll whisper that God is withholding good from you. He'll point to everyone around you who seems to have what you're praying for, and he'll tempt you to envy, to self-pity, to despair. But don't you believe it? God is never late. He's never early. He's always right on time. And the people He has destined for your life, the ones who will love you without condition, pray for you without ceasing, and stand with you through every storm, they're worth the wait. So what do you do in the meantime? You pour into the relationships God has given you. You serve, you grow, you let God refine you into the kind of person who can keep the blessings He wants to send. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't force doors open that God has clearly shut. You stand firm in faith, knowing that the one who holds your future also holds your heart. And when His timing is perfect, when the season is right, He will bring across your path the people who will not just enter your life, but enrich it. Wait for God's best. It's always worth it.